Let me, there, she's unmuted.
Sherry, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Boy, you are so ready.
Does he know she had the reverb?
Yeah, that was a hell of a echo. Start some reverb behind you. All right, let's see. First of all, I have to figure out, does anybody know what date it is? The 14th?
That's the 14th.
14th.
All right, so I'm officially calling the West County Wastewater Subcommittee, Global Warming Subcommittee in order on April 14th at 10:08. First item on the agenda, please.
Is roll call. Director Weiner,
Here.
Director Stanley,
There, we can try it again.
Yes.
thank you. Aaron Winter.
Here.
Do I need to do all of the other staff or just?
No, just the board
Okay.
members on the committee.
Okay, so,
Yeah, there's no one else on the subcommittee.
right, okay. And the Pledge of Allegiance or observation of moment of silence?
I'll begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all,
Oh,
as soon as possible.
okay, we're up to the approval of the agenda order. Would you like me to read the whole thing?
Sure.
Any member of the board/committee may request an agenda item be postponed, removed, or heard out of order. An item may not be added to the agenda unless it meets the requirements of an emergency situation as defined in Government Code Section 54956.5.
Director Stanley, do you have any objections to the agenda as it stands?
No.
All right. We should just move on. I think the agenda will be fine.
All right, public comment. Would you like me to continue with the entire thing?
No, unless there is some email or a member of the public that's attending raises
No
their
email.
hand.
No email to me, no.
Justin, can you see anybody raising their hand?
There is no other public attendees.
Great.
Okay, continuing on, the consent calendar. Matters of the consent calendar are considered routine and will be approved or recommended without discussion. Prior to approval/recommended of the consent calendar, a member of the board/committee may request that an item be removed for discussion. If a member of the public would like to speak to an item on the consent calendar, the member should email the board clerk and my email address prior to the start of the meeting. I did receive none. Part A is minutes. Approve or recommended board approval of the minutes of March 9th, 2020 Planning Committee meeting.
This is the Global Warming Committee meeting and the minutes. Sherry, do you have any comment on the minutes?
Yeah, it just, for some reason that ended up in there. I do have the right agenda.
Good. No, I wasn't worried about that. I was just correcting the record.
Oh, sorry.
Sherry, do you have any objections or changes that you would like to see on the consent calendar?
No, I move we approve it.
All right, so there's a consensus to approve the consent calendar.
Thank you.
Next item.
Discussion A, review and discuss district programs and projects related to environmental stewardship.
Who has that one?
I'll start that off, Director Weiner. Good morning. This is Andrew Clow, the Deputy General Manager. And the agenda item is a fairly loose agenda item, broad, I should say, perhaps. Just to give you an update on all the projects and programs. We've had needless to say, a lot of activity going on over the last 6 months. And we don't want to lose sight of all the work that is being done as part of many of our projects toward the carbon neutral goal of the board, as well as the just broadly environmental stewardship. And so today we want to run through a number of those projects and programs and update the committee on where we are and get some feedback, get some input. In general, we're going to start off with a little discussion on the Climate Action Plan. This plan that the board adopted back in December, if you recall, and we brought that forward. It would help in our SRF applications, but also really is the guiding document for West County Wastewater on climate action, on carbon reduction, et cetera. It's the plan that should guide what we do going forward and incorporate all the different actions. It talks a little bit about the greenhouse gas baseline, the shoreline resiliency project, as well as commuting, transportation, fleet management, all the areas where we can take some actions to help reduce our carbon footprint, including one of the items of interest to the board, which was the board actions for sustainability. Some of the things that the board could do themselves as members of the board and things we could do in how we manage meetings and manage the boardroom itself. One perhaps long-term and positive benefit of the crisis we're in right now is transportation. And commuting and transportation is one of the, by far, largest emitters of pollution and carbon. And with all of the businesses being shut down, the air quality is amazingly good in many places in the world, which haven't seen this kind of good air quality in a long time. But going forward, as we reopen businesses, et cetera, and ourselves in particular, that we may be having more people working remotely more frequently than we have in the past, which could go a long way towards some of our goals when we were trying to figure out, electric vehicles, commuting options, et cetera. The telecommuting option may be one big one that could help us get there. But I'm going to ask John and Michael are going to talk a little bit, give a little bit of an overview of the Climate Action Plan, and then also talk about the board actions for sustainability and a little bit about what that means and what we can bring forward. And this was discussed, I guess, at the March one. I know it was discussed at the March 9th Global Warming Committee. I wasn't here for that one, but as part of that, there's been a lot of work by staff put together, and we'll be bringing a report together, not at this, what that would be. A good question there, Director Wiener. What day is it? It's they all blur together. Tomorrow, not tomorrow's board meeting, but the next one, we should be able to bring that forward. And what we'd be looking for is the board on that, the types of things that you could adopt would be things specific to what the board actions could be and what you guys could do. But then there's also management of the board room itself and some other activities that we can take to help reduce. And that wouldn't be so much something that the board would adopt, but you already have by adopting the Climate Action Plan and giving us a framework and a direction that staff should be taking. So staff will also put forward a number of things that we know we can do as part of an implementation which is consistent with the Climate Action Plan and consistent with the intent of what the board wants to do, as well as what the board's adopting for their own actions. Then Aaron's going to talk a little bit about the ENGIE, the energy project, and what's going on at the plant right now with the digester, and also the greenhouse gas baseline, which is critical to the whole Climate Action Plan and creating a baseline so we have something from which we can measure.
Hi, this is Michael Savannah, the Infrastructure and Planning Department
Go
Manager.
forward and give a
Oh,
little.
I'm sorry, Andrew. I thought you had froze up and got cut off.
Am I?
No, you're okay. Maybe it was just on my end. I know sometimes you get cut off.
He was frozen for about 30 seconds.
How long? 30
Or,
seconds?
not that long, maybe about 10, 15 seconds.
Ah, well, 10 seconds. I don't know if I said anything worth listening to in the last 10
I-
seconds.
I think we lost Aaron.
Well, we got, I
Aaron's
see
there.
Director Weiner, you were saying something, but you're muted. We're all learning. But yeah, sometimes my internet connection here, I have some competition out in the other home office here, and sometimes when she's dragging down the internet, I get slowed down. Anyway, what I was asking is John or Michael, I'm not sure which one of you was going to take the lead on just giving a brief overview of the intent of the Climate Action Plan and how that was a guiding document that we're going to be using and developing further, but it sits there as that framework guiding document for us right now.
Yeah, this is Michael Savannah, the Infrastructure and Planning Department Manager. I'd like to talk a little bit about the Climate Action Plan, and I'll probably bump up against a couple of the things that Aaron's talking about in the greenhouse gas update. So, and I've asked John to come in case there's any details or more detail that you guys would like to discuss that I may or may not be privy to, as John has done a lot of the work on, he's done the bulk of the heavy lifting on the Climate Action Plan, on all of these initiatives, actually. So I'd like to start by just giving us some perspective. The board has adopted a carbon negative goal by 2031, which is a very aggressive goal. From there, a number of these initiatives came to be. The Climate Action Plan is just that. It's a plan to help us reach our climate goals. It was developed after the 2031 goal was adopted. It's a very high-level plan. It was originally intended to for use with the SRF funding. It would have allowed us additional points to further qualify for SRF funding. The state did not accept our plan as a viable plan, as it lacked some detail and specific initiatives. But the work was not a waste, as it is work that we will use to guide the initiatives that we will be implementing moving forward. In order to be accepted by the state, it needs, and also in order for it to be more usable for us, it needs scientific input, it needs specific project initiatives, it needs funding, and it needs leadership. And we're filling in all of those pieces. It doesn't currently have detail on how we will achieve the plan's objectives. It has a very high level objective of environmental stewardship, but it doesn't have specific detail in there. And we're working on that, and it will have that detail as we work further through this. What it will likely never have, or at least I shouldn't say never, what it will not have when we finish this round of planning is a specific detailed goal to reach carbon net negative by 2031. That's going to take some more work. It looks like we lost. Oh no, I see you up there, Director Weiner. The pictures are moving around a bit, and I wanted to make sure that we didn't lose you. You used to be in the center of my screen, and now you're way up at the top right. So currently the plan is complete. Currently, the plan is complete for the district's original intent, which was to submit to SRF as part of our funding application package. And it's well on its way to being completed to the SRF standards, which were to add the additional details on the individual initiatives. Excuse me. Again, this is work that we will use as well to help us define how we're going to get to our climate action goals. The scientific input that I talked about earlier is being developed in our GHG baseline, and essentially our GHG baseline is really a measure of where we currently are. in terms of greenhouse gases. That's being completed by a consultant, Sage, and it's been peer reviewed by another consultant, which is Kenwood Energy. We had an additional peer review by the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, who really raved about the work that we've done. There's a couple of things that I think are important to connect the two. We have a plan, but we have a high-level plan, and we're adding specific initiatives to that plan in order to reach our goal. But it's really important for us to understand where we currently are in order to be able to measure the progress that we make. And that's really the importance of the GHG baseline. It's really where we're starting from, and it's what we'll be able to measure against as we're making improvements to our greenhouse gas reduction. And we'll be able to go back and say, from the time that the GHG baseline was completed, these projects and this amount of money that we've invested have netted out a 10% reduction or a 20% reduction in our greenhouse gases. I had a couple of other points that I was going to make, but I think Aaron may go a lot more in detail with the NG project and the greenhouse gas baseline. So I definitely don't want to steal all of his thunder, but I think it's worth mentioning that the energy project that we are talking about with NG plays well with our climate action plan, as does the greenhouse gas baseline, as does the board actions for sustainability. They're all pushing us in the direction we are looking to go, and they're all helping us get closer to our goal of carbon negative by 2031. I think that the very low-hanging fruit and maybe the first quarter or the first 20% are going to be very easy to fund and explain. And as you get lower in the amount of greenhouse gas that you're producing, and you're trying to go after the higher apples on the tree, it gets a lot more costly, and there's going to at some point be a decision to be made around whether or not the juice is worth the squeeze, so to speak, because we're going to get to a point where, and maybe it's the last 20 or 25%, that it's going to be extremely expensive to capture that greenhouse gas. And it'll probably be more expensive than what we will get back in monetary value, but the value that we will provide to the environment may be worth it, and that'll be a decision that the board and management need to make when we get there. That's essentially the update I wanted to give you. If there's any specific details that you guys would like to talk about as it relates to the climate action plan, myself and John are here for questions, and we'll be here once Aaron goes through the greenhouse gas and the NG project if we need to chime in on that as well.
I would just like to say, this is everything you've said is great news. This idea of going carbon net negative is not, is only slowly being considered by the world. And I have confidence that as you approach the last 20 or 30%, the solutions will have been created ahead of that, as a district, because this isn't a problem that we're just, working on our own. I have to say, the fact that you have a plan, that you have an outline, is awesome. And as the time goes on, the details that you're working on will fill in the plan and give further impetus to things that we can do that don't cost that much money, because we are restricted by our budgets. But I'm just, as I heard you talk, Michael, I was just so pleased and proud that our district is tackling this problem and has put some time and thought into it. And I think that's the beginning of great things. So thanks for your report, and thanks to everybody at the district that has taken this on. It's great. I did want to mention, just throwing it out there, particularly Mr. Weiner, that we should look to biology because that's what we specialize in terms of our processes. And I think that's where our solution will come from, the low-cost solution. So that's my only comment on moving forward. And thank you, because this is great. This is great. Thanks a lot.
No problem.
Okay.
Justin, will you mute me and let me just talk on my phone? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. You're on your phone right now. Let me just
I
make
think
sure.
that stops the abbreviation.
Yes. So I think, yeah, it's a little better now.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to wait till after Aaron's done before I make any comments.
Are we ready to move into the greenhouse gas reduction
The next thing,
report?
no, if we could, since it ties, we could either go there and then push to a little bit later. We're going to talk a little bit about the board actions for
Oh, I'm sorry.
sustainability. And that directly related, we could either talk about that now or after Aaron speaks. Would you? It's up to you, Director Weiner.
No, I'm perfectly happy with the direction you're going right now.
Okay. Well, the next thing, we'll be with Aaron in just a minute, because he's going to talk about greenhouse gas emissions as well as some of the projects at the plant and the potential scope of the whole energy reduction project. But John or Michael, if you could just continue a little bit and talk about some of the actions. I know the board wanted to be able to demonstrate their leadership and make sure they're taking some actions themselves at the board meetings. And while some of these may be fairly minor in our overall carbon impact, they definitely are symbolic, and some of them can actually have a little more sizable impact as well. But there's quite a few things that the staff has taken a look at, and John and or Michael will give a little bit of review of where we are with that as well. Are we going to get John on this one?
I think
All
I'm
right.
going to do this one.
All right.
Can you hear me? I haven't spoken in the meeting yet. So this is John Hagan. I work for Mr. Savannah in the I&P department. We tried to create a list of potential initiatives for the board to consider adopting, and presented that to the Global Warming Committee at the last meeting, if I'm not mistaken. I took some feedback from them and some suggestions and commentary. And I believe we prepared a board report that'll be going forward. I think it's at the next meeting. Andrew, you could, confirm that. I'm not positive.
That's what we're looking at. I think it's May 6th. Is that the next Wednesday?
That's correct, May 6th.
Yeah, that's what we're looking at right now.
Right. So the task was, what could the board do that might demonstrate leadership and make some impact? I think primarily aspirational, because there are only 5 of them and they only have one boardroom. But some of the initiatives we talked about were environmentally sustainable in nature, having to do with energy efficient computers and a lack of paper production as much as possible, possibility of mitigating air travel was something that the board might want to consider. There were some suggestions about potentially, as part of the ESCO project, doing a lighting reduction measure and temperature control and dead bands in the boardroom to limit the amount of heating and cooling energy that's utilized in the area. And a big one from a sustainability perspective had to do with the recycling efforts in the boardroom and how we sort of monitor and police our behaviors in there, staff primarily, as well as the public, and how we utilize our recycling stream initiatives, and even to the level of the menu of board meetings, and whether or not we wanted to stand strong environmentally and eliminate some of the high carbon content food items that are typically on the menu for organizations and the rest of the world. It's well known that uh, providing water is very carbon intensive, and that, for example, beef cattle drink a lot of water and need it, and also produce a fair amount of greenhouse gases themselves and use a lot of land to be able to support cattle. So many people feel, and I think it's been scientifically proven, that a vegetarian diet has less carbon in it than one that has traditional protein sources. We tried to create as many options as possible that the board could pick and choose between, and some of them are more or less easily implemented, but all of them will show that the board is serious and invested in making a difference environmentally, and by taking early action can help staff go through what I think will be some periods of adjustment about how we do our business as a staff. If we're going to be emphasizing recycling more and being more strict on our own temperature controls or whatever, the fact that the board has taken that step first will be a sign that this is the right way to go, and that even the board is sharing in what might be the discomfort, I wouldn't say pain, but the discomfort of our changing approach to how we do our business. I think that is probably all I wanted to share at this point, Andrew, but if you have specific questions, I'd be happy to try to address them.
Sherry, Sherry, questions?
What?
Did you want to say anything about that report?
Well, I tend to argue with from the farmer's standpoint about how much water you need for cows versus plants, but that's sort of silly right now, so I'm not even going to get into it. But no, I don't have any questions.
Okay. So I think this is to Andrew. You're going to, we have a very large menu of items on the list that we reviewed and commented on at the last meeting. Do you envision the board picking a subset of those as the step forward, or, I mean, is there some thought about if or not encouraging the board to do them all, but doing some of them, or is there any thought to that when writing the report on this list of?
I think I'm getting the gist of your question, and it's a good one. I think what we intend to do is to provide a bit of an evaluation of each of the potential options, and then in asking what we would want from the board to adopt, that would be adopting the actions that specifically the board wants to do, like about the food, the paper agendas or electronic agendas, etc. Management of the boardroom as a whole and the lighting and some of the actions that would happen in the boardroom. We want to talk about those and bring those forward and say that here are some of the things that staff plans to be implementing now, we can implement in the near future, and how that's consistent with the goals and the strategy within the climate action plan. But it's really sort of outside of the purview of the board to be directly adopting a specific action, say for the maintenance of the facility itself, but rather you've adopted the climate action plan and said, we want you guys to go forward to achieve these goals, and we've adopted the plan that you've put forward and the strategy to make that happen. And thank you now for giving us an update and showing us a number of actions that you're taking inside of this facility. And we, would certainly appreciate any comments, feedback, etc. But then what we'd specifically be asking for, if the board wanted to adopt, was what would you guys like us to do that's specific to your management of the actions in the boardroom, and that's the meals, the agendas, the types of things that you would be working forward on, and setting the leadership example, which I think is what Director Cepeda was really talking about when he brought some of these up.
So that would be good to bring that differential up in your report.
Yeah,
We're talking about, okay, so this list has items in it that really are not specifically related to board behavior. So these are all good things that we think we should generalize or could be generalized to the whole district. So is that good? Are all these things something you want us to generalize to the whole, you think is a good idea? And then have another category of those things that are strictly within the purview of the board. So the board is clear on what their purpose for it is and what the outcome needs to be.
yeah, and it seems like a fine line in many ways, and I'm glad we're able to have the discussion here in the committee, so that when it comes forward to the board, because this was something that the general manager Lisa was struggling with a little bit, is, well, wait a second, we can't have the board adopting, item by item specific things that basically the general manager should be implementing, because here's policy being set by the board. You've done that. You've got a strategic goal. You've got a climate action plan that you adopted, and you want us to go forward. And what we would be bringing is a report to you, in essence, that say, hey, we heard you loud and clear. This is important to you, and here are some of the things that we're going to be doing inside of the facility to help do that. But I think the word you used might be a good one that we put in there, the board behavior, because there are definitely things there like your menu and a number of other items, and we can go down the list, or John did talk about some of them. Single serving plastic water bottles at board meetings. You could say, yep, we want to make sure, don't give us plastic bottles. We want water in cups and things like that. So we absolutely would say, so the board adopts sort of, this is how we want to be able to run our meetings and the behavior that we want to see, versus the lighting, where the board is adopting a specific item to say, we want you to change out those 3 light bulbs over there on the other side of the room, and we want you to use 40-watt bulbs because those 60-watt bulbs are too much energy. Actually, they're way too much. LEDs would be, 3 or 8 watts. But that kind of board adoption is getting into the realm where it's like, wait a second, that's something that the general manager should be doing, and you guys should be directing the general manager to take some actions. And then if they're not, then it's like, okay, we take that up. But that's like the strategy that I think we'll be bringing forward. But we can evaluate and talk about all of them, and John's done a bunch of work with others in doing so. And so certainly bringing everything to the board and getting feedback and comments is something that we welcome and look forward to. And I see that I think Sherry has a comment.
Yes, go ahead, Director.
Okay, so I don't think you need to unmute me, Justin, because I'm using my phone as a microphone. And when you unmute me on the computer, then it gets this lots of noise. So I agree with Director Weiner, basically with everything he said, but I think that I'm also, I want the public to see and be in the community to be aware, which is probably, I know for Lisa, she thinks I'm getting down into minutia, but that's the minutia for me is something that the public sees. So when they drive to our plant, I know I've talked to Aaron about this before, if all the garbage from Richmond Parkway is blown up against our fences, then we look trashy. It's really cool when people drive up and they see the geese and they see the turkeys. So can we use that to our advantage so that if they take a tour, they see, oh, look, they provide fresh water. Oh, look, they provide little enclosures so that the hawks can't get them, or whatever. It doesn't matter. My point is that if a member of the public drives up to our plant or drives up to our admin building, what do they see? And then the community, what are they aware of? For example, who was it that was just telling us, Andrew, about the different reviews that that you had from NG and the air quality control people, and they were all impressed? That's great. What more can we do so the community is aware of, wow, West County Wastewater District is really doing some exciting things? How can we pull in the community environmentalists to let them go plucking around our outside area and plant things, for crying out loud? What do we care? It'll make the place look better and make a better habitat, and it increases our awareness within the community. So that is also, to me, part of the equation. Yes, we are looking for the big ticket items, but we're also looking for the minutia, I think, so that what we're doing is communicating to the public in different manners. Am I making sense?
No, you've made these points before. I think we hear you, and it's something I could further discuss with Lisa and find out what we can do. You're mentioning some very specific solutions, and then you're talking also in more general terms where you say we want to demonstrate to the public. And I think that somewhere in between there, some of the very specific solutions might be something we can do, but also looking at some others for how can we demonstrate that leadership and demonstrate that coordination. And then we do have, there are a lot of things we have to look at. If we have volunteers out walking around the lagoons planting plants, there's a lot of liability, there's a lot of other issues. There's staffing. It does take a lot of staffing, time, and coordination to do volunteer events. I did a lot of those when I worked in Berkeley and the City of Oakland and the Port of Oakland, where we, clean up crews and stuff. You can get a lot of benefit from it, but it does take it takes a good deal of staff effort and somebody who's working on it. So we have to make a commitment to that as well. Joe does that and puts together some good teams to go out to various community events. But bringing in volunteers, I'm not saying no to that, Director Stanley. I'm just saying these are all the things we have to look at.
No, I'm not married to any of my examples that I use. I keep repeating because they're easy for me to remember.
Sure.
But for example, one of the questions that you guys get some of the same emails that we get, and there was the email from Cass, I think, yesterday. What was the 4 or 5 different organizations were giving COVID-19 webinars. Well, one of the questions, if I was the public, would be, so you're recycling water, great. Does it have any of that flu stuff in it? That's a question that we should be able to answer and that we're publicizing to places. So that's what I'm saying.
Well, yes.
What can we do that makes the public aware that we are safe and we're environmentally friendly and that we're looking to give back to our community?
Okay.
I don't really care what it is. I just want it. I want it known outside of our workplace.
Mm-hmm. And this is also then consistent with something that we've been working on, and that's the whole community outreach strategy and trying to improve that all ties together. And what messages do we want to get out through that? So we need to improve a lot of our ability to get messages out through social media, the website, and the specific example that you just gave there about, what does it mean? Is the wastewater safe? What do we know? Unfortunately, some of that's constantly changing because we're learning about this particular virus. But yeah, your point is well taken. I don't have a specific answer for you at the moment, but I'm trying to make sure that you understand we're hearing it and we're trying to figure out some ways to do something about it.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Nope.
All right.
All right.
Aaron has been waiting patiently to give us some details on projects and scope.
Looks like Andrew froze up again. Can you hear me and see me okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So, Justin, are you able to share your screen with me so that I can pull up a document, or are you going to pull up that greenhouse gas document? Justin's on mute, I think.
Oh, sorry. You need to go on here. You want to look at which document?
Is it possible you can share your screen so I can pull it up, or do you need to pull it up?
Yeah, you could share your screen. Do you have that option?
Yeah.
Yeah, you could share your screen. Otherwise, I could do it if you need to.
Okay, bear with me for 1 second, please. Can you see that?
We can't see the document, but we do see that you selected it.
Go back into your screen share and choose an open document. I think if you did that. Which one do you want, Aaron? And I can open it up.
Bear with me for 1 second. Did that work?
Yes.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay. So I'm going to resist the temptation to get too much down into the details, and just give you a little bit of background in terms of where we are with the SAGE greenhouse gas audit. As you know, I think it was probably 7 or 8 months ago that we engaged SAGE to do this audit. And have you seen this document before? Has anybody? I know internally, it's been circulated to staff, but Director Weiner or Stanley, have you seen this yet?
I don't.
No.
I have.
Okay, so again, just to kind of start with a little update of where we are.
Excuse me,
SAGE
Aaron.
provided this draft a month ago in March. John Haig, you're nodding your head. If there's anything you want to chime into as well, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Aaron, we haven't sent the board or even Lisa or Andrew, I think, the final version, because the Bay Area Air Quality Management District review only completed on Tuesday. So,
Okay.
Should
I not share this?
No, from a draft perspective, you certainly can talk about it, but it's not the final report because we haven't
Yes.
received that yet from SAGE.
Yes.
Yeah.
So key point
Thank you, John.
here. Thank you. Key point, draft. Okay, this is a draft. And I wanted to say that it was submitted in March, and SAGE representatives have asked us for some more information, which we provided last week. And that information they're incorporating into this draft, which will form the final product, which we hope to have in a couple weeks. Is that good, John? So because you haven't seen it, I've spent several hours looking at it. I just want to go through kind of the first couple of pages, and just to give you a flavor for what the document is, and also just some of to me, the amazing preliminary numbers and things that, from a planning perspective, in terms of future projects, we're gonna save in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. So essentially, table of contents, summary, tables, all that good stuff. And I really am going to focus here. And so when we look at the next page or two, and please, if you've got any questions or anything's not clear, again, understanding that I've looked at this thing for a few hours, and it already makes sense to me, and it's not going to make that much sense to you until you can really look at it. The things to really focus on are the scopes here. And the scopes are the different emission sources kind of by category. and you've got 1, 2, 3, and I know I'm belaboring the obvious, and biomass combustion, which is a separate source. It'll make more sense in a minute, but it explains here what the sources are. Direct emissions by source within our boundary, say if the treatment plant is number 1. Number 2 is a special category of indirect emissions. And as you can see at the end, that's basically electricity provided by PG&E, for example, where the emissions from the electricity that we're using at the plant are generated and have impacts elsewhere. And then 3, basically all other emissions. And like I said, it'll hopefully become just a little bit clearer in a minute. So this is the table with the different scopes. And if you'd like me to refer back at all, to this, the scope definitions, just let me know. So again, this is a simple table that tells you that gives you the level of emissions in carbon equivalents, CO2 equivalents each year, as you can see here. And I want you to pay attention to this number right here. I mean, just look at that number in terms of the overall emissions. We're going to go to another table that has a little bit more information about what these individual numbers mean in a minute. But the big thing is if you take away, just exclude the wastewater collection system, which is roughly 850 equivalents, and then the BC for right now, you can see that within right here, that number is whatever it is, 90 or 95%. Again, excluding the BC and the wastewater collection system numbers, it's like 90% of our CO2 emissions. Does that make sense? So
I don't know what BC.
I'm
What does
sorry, Dr.
BC
Stanley.
What does BC mean?
BC means combustion of renewable biomass is considered a part of the short-term carbon cycle. So for the treatment plant, you know that we have digesters that create methane gas, right?
Yes.
35% of the gas is carbon dioxide. 65% is methane. And so we produce roughly 110,000 standard cubic feet per day of methane in our digester, and 35% of that is carbon dioxide, which is not burned and goes into the atmosphere. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So again,
Yes.
looking at that number, I'm going to go into the next table here and show you what that number is. And if you look right there, it's fugitive methane from the sludge lagoons.
Wow.
So 90% or more of what you would consider controllable emissions is from the sludge lagoons.
Wow.
So essentially every day we send whatever, 50, 60,000 gallons, maybe a little less of digested sludge into the lagoons. Keep in mind that we also get an equivalent amount from the city of Richmond, and that all of that material goes into the 13 sludge lagoons, which I think is roughly 100 acres. And the biological activity and the production of methane does not stop when it goes into the lagoons. So really, that's the main point I wanted to bring to your attention out of this, out of this study right now. And at whatever point next month this is finalized, SAGE is going to have their opportunity to come in, talk about all these different numbers, what they mean. It's important to note that, I can just kind of run through it. Actually, let me stop and see if there's any questions at this point.
So that is amazing, and a great find. Of do anything about that at this point, but that is just some new information that we can work with. and pretty stark. My other question would be, would there be like, in terms of the lagoons, the same 30% CO2 produced?
Yes, I think that's again, that's a fair assumption, because basically it's the bacteria, and what happens is when it goes into the lagoons, you're not heating like you are in the digester, right? So assuming, and again, we're assuming that SAGE's numbers are accurate here, right? They're using models that were produced by somebody else, and so there's a plus or minus factor here. But the point is that when we're digesting sludge in the digesters, we're heating, we're mixing, all of that process control stops when it goes into the lagoons, and it's more of a kind of an incidental biological activity that just increases for some, or excuse me, continues for some period of time. But I'm assuming that there is some percentage. I don't know if it's the 35% that's also CO2. And as you know, I think methane actually has a worse impact in terms of greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. I don't know what the multiplier is.
It's much more important in terms of its effect, but it doesn't last as long as CO2. So
right, and I can tell you from the standpoint of the air district, they've already started their focus on treatment plants and reducing methane emissions, as well as CO2 and other emissions, and that's something that's going to be coming in the very short next few years.
Well, all I have to say from that scientific report is scientifically that's some potent shit.
Yeah, and that number, when I saw this, I almost fell over. I had no idea, when I saw that number.
Wow.
Well,
I have a question. My question is SAGE going to give us any idea of if we did this with our biosolids, would it, there's all these different options that everyone's considering what to do with their poop. So will we get those options, and what is the best option as far as air quality, greenhouse gases?
I am not sure if SAGE is the group to do that. I think it's ENGIE.
Do you mind if we jump in here?
I'm sorry.
Do you mind if we jump in and answer that question?
Please, yeah.
John, you want to take that?
Yes, I certainly can. SAGE's scope does not include any suggestions or recommendations concerning how we would reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. At this point, their job is to create the baseline and tell us what our sources are. I'm also in agreement with Aaron that they may not be the right firm for that purpose. I think we probably want to talk to somebody with more experience directly with wastewater treatment plants and effluent, and I think that ENGIE is a good source. I think they have some very capable technical people that speak Aaron's language on their team. So I would expect that the ESCO report that will be coming forward in likely June from ENGIE will include process improvements and sludge treatment options that would reduce our specific emissions in those areas. It probably won't be the last time that we're dealing with this issue either. But I think Aaron is correct in saying ENGIE is probably a more appropriate resource for that information.
Well, can I follow up on a question there? So you just said you think it'll be included in ENGIE's thing, and if ENGIE is the one who could give us that information, I at least would say then let's make sure that it's included so that we have something that we can discuss.
Yeah,
if you just a sec, Aaron, just to say that I think that the questions that you're bringing up, Director Stanley, provide a perfect segue for what Aaron's going to talk about next with the scope of NG. And NG has it's a different kind of a contract, and so we actually we got to take a look at that. What they're going to review for us, or if we have somebody else work in partnership, or we adjust what our contract language looks like with them. But there's a bunch of other things that come into play here on how we would store or handle those biosolids, what that would mean if we gain access to all of those lagoons for overflow protection, and a number of other things, other factors that can come into play here. So it will absolutely all have to be evaluated, and NG is going to be a big part of some of that initial evaluation for us. And I think that's what Aaron can lead into right now with the scope of what we're looking at with them, and some of the other things that Aaron's also looking into regarding the digester and some other potential things to do there with our solids.
Okay, just a second there.
We got a hand up from John too.
Okay, well, can I just throw my little comment in, John? While we're in this process of figuring this out and learning this stuff and going, holy crap, this would be such a perfect thing that we're taking really good notes on, so that when we reach the end and figure out what our solution is going to be, a really good video or something that educates the public as to what we found out and what we did about it and how we're making our environment better. And so can we keep in mind to keep really good notes as this process is going on?
Absolutely. That's why it's the baseline study. So we have that kind of information from the beginning. John,
Great.
we're going to have to let John speak, or he's going to implode over here.
I just wanted to make one point, following on Andrew's comment about the special contract. The reason I said I think that NG will be commenting on this, and Aaron, please feel free to expand on this, is that part of what we've asked them to do is to give us the greenhouse gas emissions reductions that are available in the energy project. The problem with solving our biosolids emissions problem is that it may not be cost effective from an energy savings perspective. I talked at the beginning, Michael talked at the beginning about the cost of doing some of the work that we're doing. The energy project has to pay for itself through energy savings for us to be able to follow through with NG. They may not be able to get all of our emissions that way. They may say, you know, you need a separate study and it's going to cost you money out of your pocket. It's not part of our project. So they're only going to do the engineering on the work that they're going to do the work on. They're not going to do all the engineering that the district might need to have done to eliminate all of our greenhouse gas emissions, because that's not in their scope. This is a really, really big onion with a lot of layers to peel, and we're bringing forward a lot of different experts to help us do their part of it. So I'm sorry, Director Stanley, that I had to caveat my statement, but I really don't think in June that NG is going to tell us, here's your solution and we can include it in our project. I think we'll have the identified scope of the problem, and we'll have whatever piece they can address from their measures. And then I'm going to get off my soapbox and let Aaron and Andrew take over. Thanks.
Thank you, John.
John, in June, maybe NG won't be able to solve the problem, but I would imagine staff is going to be able to say, this is what else we need to find out. This is the type of contractor we need to bring in to further answer our questions, correct?
We can have it start to develop that broader strategy. And again, Aaron's going to talk a little bit about the digester, and that's kind of at the heart of a bunch of this, is what do we do that we're not necessarily going to have all the energy savings, but how we handle those biosolids, what we do with the digester, whether we stay in the lagoon business at all. And then there are some great benefits to getting out of the lagoon business. One of them just showed up on that table there. There's cost to it, and we have to figure out, well, how do we fund this? How do we get this money? How do we raise rates? What kind of bonds do we need? But there's a whole lot of other things behind it. But as a broader long-term strategy, that it's important information, which is why we have to do this kind of baseline survey and the work that Engie's doing, and then not just move forward with each of these projects as an individual project, but group them together as one overall strategy for how are we best going to use the property down by the plant, how are we going to meet our compliance requirements, how are we going to meet our carbon reduction goals, and how are we going to deal with sea level rise? And do we want those lagoons out there, or are we better off protecting a smaller footprint in the future than having to protect all those lagoons? That's a big cost in the future that we might be able to defray if we have a different method of handling biosolids. So there's a whole lot of different things that we want to pull into this. So June will give us another piece of that information.
Director Stanley, do you have any more?
No, I'm going to shut up for a while.
So I just wanted to ask Aaron, how many square acres did you say were taken up with lagoons? And does that include our equalizing basins as well?
You know what? I'm sorry, Director Wiener. I think I'm estimating that we have 90 acres of lagoons. I haven't looked at that information in a month or two. My recall is that we have about 125 total acres at the plant site. I mean, this is just memory from looking at some stuff earlier, and I'm thinking 80 to 90 acres is in our 13 lagoons.
Yeah, I just wanted. Yeah, I didn't need an exact number. I'm just ballparking how much square footage is emitting this tremendous amount of greenhouse gases. And then did the study also include our equalizing basins, or that wasn't part of it?
Yeah, the EQ basins would be a nominal amount of, because really there's no organic material in there. Whatever material that there is some organic matter in I think it's EQ number 1. That's the first basin that takes the flow. It's the smaller basin, but it doesn't get anaerobic, and it doesn't get into that digestion process where it would be giving off a lot of that material.
Thank you.
So just a couple more things I wanted to give you as examples here before we leave to the other document, the NG document. This number right here, are you able to see my cursor on the screen?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's thanks, Director Stanley. The 66.5, for example, is polymer materials, and I'm not sure if it's just polymer or the chemicals that we use, and it's something that I'll get clarification, but I just wanted to give you some examples of what some of these other numbers mean. So when either chemicals that we use in our process or polymers are produced, this is the carbon equivalents that are emitted based on their calculation and their modeling. And there's some other stuff here. When you get the chance to go into details, it talks about the amount of fuel, based on all of our commutes every year. And kind of one more thing before we depart is, this would shift, I think, into a category 2. For example, part of this would be reduced and shift into category 2 if folks went to electric vehicles. And that's just kind of how this whole thing works. And, again, really just wanted to show you that this is a lengthy document and it has a whole bunch of other details when it gets finalized and you have the opportunity to look at it. But that's really all I wanted to talk about for right now. Any questions before we move on?
No?
No.
Well, that was worth the meeting. Thank you.
Good. I wish I could take credit for the work.
It's just amazing.
It is amazing. It is amazing. So back to Engie, and before we go in here, I think we did have a meeting in November with Engie, right? And I think they ran through their preliminary opportunity assessment report. Is that right, John, Andrew? Is that correct? And I think the board, that was in front of the board, wasn't it?
I think NG has met the board, but I don't think they brought forward a comprehensive scope statement to the board as a whole. But you know, and maybe Michael could weigh in on that. I think that they did a presentation to staff about the sort of the intended scope, and to make sure that we were comfortable with them approaching the initiatives that they were discussing doing the engineering on. That, at least that's my recollection.
They did a presentation to the Global Warming Committee.
Okay. So you have seen then the projects that they have, you know, you've seen them, not that you necessarily remember, but you've seen some level of the projects, right? So
I don't
what?
recall anything about.
Okay. So just, you know, this is a document that Andrew requested from them just a couple weeks ago. And really what it does is it just bulletizes all of the things that they're looking at, you know, in their ESCO program. And they're really chomping at the bit. And I think we were supposed to have a meeting with them last week, excuse me, that they asked to postpone for another couple weeks. Is that right?
We're talking tomorrow.
We are. Okay, so is that a presentation with the board, or is that staff?
No, just
staff?
staff discussion.
Okay. So anyway, just to go through here, you know, these are the projects that they presented on before and that they're still focusing on. You've got upgrades to the influent pump system, the grit system, solids concentration of digester feed, and really what that is that's just allowing us to send a thicker solids to the digester to get better digestion in that process. Gravity belt thickeners. You may or may not know that the DAFT system that we have at the plant that thickens our waste sludge that goes to the digester is 40 to 50 years old and only, you know, partially operational and effective. So that provides new systems for that process. Aeration efficiencies. I'm sorry, Director Stanley.
Can you explain what it is that you just were saying is barely functioning?
The Daffy Duck system.
It's DAFT. They're called DAFT, and it's short for dissolved air flotation thickener. So you're probably aware that we use activated sludge as our biological process to remove the nutrients from the wastewater and the food component from the sewage. So when we remove that activated sludge from the system, we have to keep it in a certain balance, a certain mass in the plant. So we're always removing some of it every day. And we have to thicken it before it goes to the digester. So the DAFT technology is the technology we've used for 50 years. And so we're looking at it. Is that clear?
Yes, I was just laughing.
Yeah, so anyway, we're actually doing a separate study with another engineering firm and piloting this new technology for thickening. And that's another project that we're working on at the plant. It's kind of on hold. Kind of on hold for the time being because of the COVID thing, and a lot of the companies, you know, they're not traveling and they're not working right now, as you know. So number five is high efficiency aeration blowers, which will reduce electricity consumption, better digester heating and mixing systems or improvements, new cogeneration, gas treatment, power generators, and digested sludge dewatering. Number 9 is a thermal drying system. And then the last couple of things you can see are piping and storage system for Richmond sludge, electric vehicle chargers, LED lighting, and solar PV for a couple of the lift stations, our larger lift stations. So more solar. And you may or may not have seen this before, but this is just a configuration of what the solar arrays might look at those couple of lift stations, our larger lift stations. So really, NG's focus is looking at this pool of projects. Some of them will reduce electrical consumption. Some of them will reduce operational costs, staff time, and that type of thing. And so part of the thing, and Andrew touched on this, earlier before, I started talking about this, this scope of work document. We're going to have to figure out, based on this pool of projects, how we proceed, which of the projects we want to do, and that type of thing. And that's going to be the next step after they finalize this thing and give us their presentation and present the financials and other aspects to the board. Any questions at that point? There was a couple of more details I wanted to talk about that I think will answer some previous questions. But at this point, any more questions about that?
Director Stanley?
No.
I have a question regarding, can you go back up to the list? Slowly. Thermal sludge dryer system. Does this dryer sludge, where does it, is it part of our, would it go into our basins, drying basins?
So if you look right here, and this kind of answers, some of the questions that we talked about when we were talking about sludge lagoons. One of the things that has been kind of one of my objectives, and I think our objectives that we talked about a little bit, is getting out of the sludge lagoon, the sludge farming business. And there's a lot of good reasons, costs, staff time, as you just saw that nearly 4,000 carbon equivalence emissions thing. I mean, there's a lot of good reasons that we want to get out of the sludge drying and the lagoon business. But if you look here at from number 7, reciprocating energy or engine cogeneration system, all the way down through 8, 9, and even 10, what that's going to do for us, what that bundle of systems and items are basically sludge drying. It's a sludge dewatering and sludge drying system. And this is one of the things that ENGIE is proposing to us, and it's part of their package. So what it does is, instead of taking sludge from the digesters and sending it to the lagoons, we will be removing sludge right from the digesters and putting them right to a belt press, removing the water. We'll also be using our digester gas, which we expect will be enhanced in terms of the production, to cogenerate electricity. We will capture the heat from the reciprocating engines that are generating that electricity, use that to not only heat the digesters, but it'll, I got my partner here chirping in my ear, so excuse me. Okay, you need to give me 1 minute, okay? We got a disaster on our hands. A cat's under the couch. I apologize. But anyway, really that bundle of projects is the answer. It'll allow us to reduce natural gas consumption that we purchase from PG&E. It'll allow us to get out of the sludge lagoon business. It'll allow us to produce more energy with the methane gas we're producing from our digesters, and it'll also produce a drier sludge cake that when we haul, will reduce the hauling costs. So really, to me, it's just a matter of, it's a policy decision whether we do this through ENGIE or we figure out a different way to go, to get this capability. But, for me, that's the answer, and that's I think what our objective, ought to be seriously. So
can we get a calculation of greenhouse gas emission? In other words, a comparison between what we're currently putting in the atmosphere versus what we would end up putting in the atmosphere going this way.
yes.
Yes, I agree with Aaron. I think part of the ESCO approach is that they will identify energy savings and the associated greenhouse gas emissions savings with any of the initiatives that they're suggesting that we implement.
That'd be great. Cool. Awesome stuff. Thank you. Sherry, anything else?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
And then that really, that's all I wanted to, I mean, that's probably more than I was hoping for in terms of this discussion to get. I hope I didn't get myself in trouble by jumping the gun on any of this stuff, John or Andrew or Michael, but I mean, I think this is important to get out there and for folks to see.
I'm just taking it as optimistic, not as a done deal.
It's definitely
Well,
not a done deal yet.
Yeah.
That's the kind of information that we've been asking for a long time, and it's really nice to see.
Yeah, and how this is costed out is going to be a big part of the trick here. And because we have such a essentially sweetheart deal right now with how our sludge ultimately gets disposed of and trucked off, the actual cost savings and the trucking distances are minimal, and the cost is very minimal. So this is an example of where it may not pencil out in the type of a contract that John was referring to that we would have with ENGIE, but it may pencil out for us as a district as a whole to do because of a number of the other benefits on the land and the carbon footprint, how big of a footprint we need to protect, et cetera. And so all of that's going to be part of what we're considering, and we'll have ENGIE chomping at the bit while we're still chewing over some of this and delaying them slightly as we try to figure out exactly what we want to do. But
They got
I
enough
think they've
business.
been a good partner.
They've got enough business to feed that horse till we decide what we're doing.
That's absolutely right. And they've done a lot of upfront work here, and I think have been working in very good faith with us. So we want to continue to do that.
John, you're on mute.
I was looking for to be recognized by someone. I just wanted to add to Andrew's comment. He is absolutely correct that this individual measure may or may not pencil out from an absolute dollar savings perspective, but there are a couple of ways that savings are identified in an ESCO that are acceptable, including cost avoidance and the use of existing capital funds that were already going to be committed. But I think the bigger point I wanted to make is not every energy measure that is suggested will produce the same amount of payback, and sometimes you can include items as an individual initiative would not pencil financially, but can be added to the overall mix. And as long as the project itself has a payback within the period of time of the useful life of the improvements, that qualifies under 4217. So what I did in my past experience was I had some infrastructure I needed to have replaced that could not qualify independently, but blended with a lighting retrofit, the overall payback was sufficient to be able to justify the project. So some of the items, like a lighting retrofit that pays back in a year and a half, balances, say, a chiller replacement that might only pay back over 16 years with a useful life of 15, but blended, you might have an overall payback of, say, 8 years, and that would work under this procurement. So there's a significant amount of work that needs to be done by the leadership team to determine which one of these initiatives are most important to us, which ones do we have to have in this, which ones can we live without, and then what's the board's perspective on how long a payback is acceptable to the board. Some boards will say, I want an internal rate of return of 5%, and that means basically our payback structure has got to be limited to stuff that pays back within 9 years. And so you cut some of the longer term things out to meet the board's fiscal goal, if you will, as opposed to whether or not it would technically qualify under this approach. So the last thing I wanted to say is Andrew's absolutely correct that we will have to be chewing on this for a period of time to determine what we think is the best thing for the district, not necessarily what ENGIE would like to do, because sometimes they aren't completely in sync between the contractor vision and what the district's appetite might happen to be. Thanks for the opportunity.
Good summary.
Can I just toss one more thing in about Richmond?
Don't bad talk Richmond.
I know this is a sensitive sensitive subject, but I think it's an important subject. As you know, I think everybody knows Richmond sends their digested sludge up the pipeline to us, and we manage it in the lagoons as a part of the JPA and the arrangements that's been in place for many years. The agreement on Richmond sending their sludge to the lagoons and their use of lagoons, I think, sunsets in 4 or 5 years. Richmond is faced in that time frame, and in their planning, on their planning horizon, is building their own dewatering facilities, in which case they would not only have to build them, they would be faced with hauling sludge, dewatered sludge out of Point Richmond. The work that NG has done so far in terms of sizing the dewatering system, it takes into account our continuing to treat Richmond's sludge. And I just wanted to point out that if that was the direction that was continued, if we were to build the system for dewatering, drying sludge, and removing sludge, we wouldn't really be changing the framework of how we've operated for decades. And that would also remove all of the capital needs for them to construct redundant facilities in Point Richmond, redundant hauling out of Point Richmond. And it would also potentially be advantageous to us because they could share in the cost of constructing these facilities, and they could also share in the operational costs. And just the last point is from talking to NG, using Richmond's sludge volume gets us into a sweet spot in terms of sizing the facilities. And if we exclude Richmond's sludge, we're not necessarily going to be in that sweet spot. And finally, the cost of sizing these facilities to include Richmond's sludge are only incrementally, they're only incremental additional costs. So it's not like we're going to get a third or a half savings by not including Richmond sludge. So again, I may be very premature in tossing out that analysis in here, but I did it anyway, and I'm sorry, Andrew, if I'm getting myself in trouble. But I think it's something important to talk about and just throw out there.
It's one of those critical points where we said that NG might be ready to roll, and we have to chew on this for a while, in that what does our agreement look like? What do we want it to look like? But it continuing to treat their sludge is potentially very beneficial for us in the overall emissions reduction calculation and the ability to be able to have this fall under the provisions that John mentioned earlier. And it makes a lot of good sense, logical sense, to not have Richmond construct that if we're really looking at this as a regional solution, and that we're all trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and finding the most efficient way of processing this. So I think we're going to have to look past and get past some of the relationship problems between Richmond and West County wastewater to see what really makes the most sense here. And hopefully we start to make some of that progress on Friday with our meeting with the West County agency. But I think that will be the next step in the pain before we get there, because we're going to basically point out some of our concerns. But I don't think it's premature to have said anything about it at all, Aaron. It's a critical thing we need to talk about.
Well, it's something that we should know when we're discussing all of this too. I mean, just because we might talk trash about Richmond doesn't mean that we're not willing to look logically at what makes sense for everybody.
That's right, and that's what we need to be doing here.
I don't recall me talking trash about Richmond, and I hope you're not including me in that, Director Stanley.
I think it would have been your predecessors, Director Wiener.
Okay, I'm just saying. Okay, yes, I'm going to be, I'm a member of the WCA, so it's good to hear this early on, and then angle, anything I have to say with this in mind, because negotiations are, there's a whole science to negotiation, and one of them is when you have mutual benefits that you can talk about to get what you want. And that's the best way to negotiate. I mean, that's one of the ways to negotiate to get what you need. So glad to hear this stuff. This stuff is, boy, I must be completely nerdy because this stuff is cool. I'm loving it.
Thank you.
Director Stanley, anything else?
Well, I just wanted to tell all the staff that was in on this, I just sent a text message to Lisa. I am so happy with every single one of you. When Harry and I first came onto the board, the staff that was in place would not be able to understand the information that you just shared with us, nor would they have known who to ask to get the information. And the different expertise and experiences that you all bring to the West County Wastewater District is so appreciative. I thank you all for everything, and I just love seeing the collaboration that takes place between you all and the thought processes that go on. And oh my gosh, it's so wonderful to see. Thank you.
Ditto.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that on behalf of all of us. And I do have one more very brief project to mention, Director Weiner, and that's to end on some other good news here, and that is the Richmond North Shoreline Resiliency Project and the grant application that we put in asking for a little over around $645,000. That it looks very likely that the grant will be approved at the May 8th board meeting of the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority.
Wow.
That's not certain yet, but it looks quite likely. We need to work on a letter of support. We then need to, I need to coordinate with Josh. And we met last week, had a teleconference, and we did have representative from Republic there, did not have Chevron. We did have the county, and we need to start looking into what does a memorandum of understanding look like? How are we going to contract? What's the procurement process for getting the design phase? What is the scope of this project? And so that's a whole nother agreement that's, there's a tremendous amount of work in front of us as far as that part goes, is creating off-ramps for parties that want to be part of this in the study phase, and then they find out, no, it really isn't going to work for them. So we want to design it in such a way that we want to go forward with some kind of a protection out there. And again, this ties back to what Aaron was talking about with the lagoons. If we are trying to protect our treatment plant proper, that part of it may still have to be some kind of a wall eventually around a portion of the plant. And if we're trying to protect a smaller footprint, that'll be beneficial. But the good news for now is it looks like we'll be able to get that grant and hopefully get contracts in place with the funding agency along the lines of or so, which is consistent with what we put in the grant application. We had a start date of around August 2020. It might be a little bit later than that. And then what that means at that point, we could start the procurement process. But before we do that, we have to understand what that means, who's really administering, and how that's going to work. So like I said, there's a lot of unanswered questions, but the good news is it looks like we will get the grant.
Andrew, just for your information, if we do ever need letters of support, I went to a meeting with Joe N, the Wildcat Creek, San Pablo Creeks, whatever they're called. And there's like 20 different environmental organizations, and they all said at that meeting that they would provide us with any letters of support that we needed for grants or anything. So that's just for your information. And if we needed anything quick, we know the flood control people and Josh Brandt over there at the San Francisco Estuary Partnership would be able to probably put something together quicker.
Yes, and I'll be talking with Josh about that later this week or early next week, as he's kind of playing. He's got both hats on as at that particular meeting. So that's where we have to kind of figure out what role we play as the lead agency in the grant application, and what he's doing as the project manager helping us. But I'll definitely follow up on that one, and I think Josh already has, but I'll verify with him.
Aaron would like to say something.
Say again, that would be me?
No, Aaron asked
Okay.
to say something.
Sounded like Harry.
Yeah, sorry, this is Aaron again. I just I'd wanted to just touch a little bit on digesters. And Andrew closed out on a high note, and unfortunately, the whole thing with our digesters is not really a high note. But I did want to just.
Timing, Aaron.
I know. I just blew the pooch on this one. I apologize. We've talked before, and I know that we've mentioned that we have only one digester online. We've taken one out of service. We're cleaning it. We're assessing the digester and the whole digester system right now. The digesters are a core component of our processes. The digesters allow us to basically digest sludge and produce methane gas. Unfortunately, our digesters, our two digesters, primary digesters, are circa early 1970s. And it's all original equipment. All the digester tanks, the peripheral equipment, the mixers, the gas handling, the flares, everything. And so right now we're probably a month away from completing the formal conditional assessment of the digesters and the associated equipment. Synagro is the company that's going to be cleaning the digester. They're scheduled to mobilize next week. And I just wanted to toss out there that, you know, we will know within a month or 2 months whether we need to rehab the digesters, whether we'll need to build new digesters, and just what the scale of that need is going to be. And right now, operationally, we are in a compromised situation because we only have 1/2 of our digester capacity available for who knows how long. It could be years, but we do have contingency plans that are costly, that we've considered that are in place. And I just wanted to toss that out there. And again, I don't want anybody to be caught by surprise if the problems that we've kind of seen on and off persist.
Well, is there a reason
Harry?
that you can't be getting the
Director Stanley? Director Stanley?
Oh, sorry. Can I talk?
I would like to say something regarding
Okay.
the grant, which is, what was the grant for? You got frozen on my side when you mentioned the name of the grant, Andrew?
Oh, it is the grant application was to the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority Measure AA funding. And it's for the North Richmond Shoreline Living Levee Planning and Preliminary Design.
Oh, good. It's planning and preliminary design.
Right, and part of that preliminary design is actually how we're going to flesh out whether we have partners or don't have partners. And so right now, no one has to commit to anything, but what's going to happen is that means that we are going to be the ones, you know, issuing contracts and administering this. So we're clearly going to look for a project that works for us that's potentially expandable, I think would be the way we're going to try to approach this. But unless we get a partner that jumps in and says they really want to be there with us.
I think the key point is that we don't have to pay. I mean, we get help with the planning, which has always been an issue for the district because we have limited resources and we have limited time for people to plan. So this is really wonderful.
It'll still take a good deal of administrative time to keep this going, but this is huge if we can get that funding.
It's awesome. And then, Aaron, I don't think it's a surprise. Been kept abreast of the digester issue. So I don't think you did anything to the dog.
I was apologizing to Andy for my timing.
Okay, Director Stanley, your turn.
Well, first of all, one of the nice things about the grant thing is the last time we had a meeting at the plant with Chevron there and sanitation people, and a follow-up email that I had with Supervisor Joya was basically letting them know, we don't need you. We want you. We'd like this to be a big project that takes care of some of the disadvantaged communities, but we don't need you. And that's what made them sit up and go, oh, maybe we want to be involved. They don't need us. And they're already applying for a grant. So that's just for whatever it's worth. And I think it would be a good idea to be obtaining information on what it's going to cost to replace these digesters, because if we're not doing them this year, we'll be doing them sometime soon, and it would be good to get an idea of what those monies are going to cost.
If I may, one of the things that will come out of Carollo's assessment are high-level, engineering estimates for, rehab and replacement.
Okay.
I should say rehab or replacement, whatever the option turns out to be.
Thank you.
I think we don't have anything further unless you have additional questions, Director Weiner.
No, this was really great. Thank you so much. Thank you all. Next item.
Number 6, matters for staff/general manager. A, reports on issues or matters pertaining to the work of the committee.
Nothing further.
I don't have any. Does anybody else have any? Director Stanley?
No.
Okay, I will move on to number 7, matters from members of the board. A, reports on issues pertaining to the work of the committee.
I'm working my way through all of the districts listed as members of the CASA organization and visiting their websites and looking for any unique ways that they process any unique things in their process or unique things on their websites. And pretty far down, I'd say I'm at the P's. But there's a long list. And
Giddy and thankful.
so I worked sometime. It was a project that I took on that I hadn't realized how big it would be. So that's the only report I have for committee business. Director Stanley?
Nothing.
Okay, next item, please.
B on that section is future agenda items, informal observations and inquiries regarding the business of the district or requests for placement of items of interest in the future on the future agenda.
Director Stanley?
I don't have anything specific, but one of the things that has struck me recently with all this staying at home business is in some ways we're taking a break, even though you all are all working, and it's an excellent time to reflect without all the day-to-day pressures of, you know, what is it that we want to accomplish and what do we want to become. And so I just urge you in your conversations to keep that in mind. And there you go, that's all.
Thank you. Yes, my only observation is stay safe, everybody, and yeah, social distance and wear your masks, and yay Team California, because we're doing better than a lot. So, next item, please.
Number 8 is adjournment.
We are adjourned. Thank you all. That was really a nice,
Thank you.
a good way
Thank
to
you.
spend time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.